A very good morning. Thank you for taking time on your Sunday morning to join us in the next 3 hours. So it's going to be very insightful. So we are starting with New Mom Survival Guide. Everything you need to thrive. And I want to introduce my 3 lovely panelists. So let's start with VERNESSA. VERNESSA CHUAH is the founder of Mindful Space, right? Where it's a physical space for different enrichments and support groups to come together, right? And thank you for setting that up. And then we have Dr. Jade Koa, who is an influencer, who is a doctor, who is how many more accolades? And she has 3 different businesses. One is a skincare, one is her pajamas, which you will be sharing a bit more about later, plus her own professional degree that she's holding, yeah. And then we have our psychologist, ANDREA CHONG, who has been on our panel before. So all these are a very familiar face. So with that, right, and I'm Junior, the founder of Mum Space, and with that, we're going to have a very interesting session. So feel free, type in your questions in the Q&A from the start so that we won't have an avalanche of them at the end, and we will be addressing them throughout the session, yeah? So as we start, I want to start the entire session with a poll, just to get a sense of where each and every one of you are. Because as a new mom, I think the truth is new moms have so much transition to do. It's an entire lifestyle change. So if we can have the poll, do let us know, what is the biggest concern you have? Would it be the lack of sleep? In-laws parenting style or the difference? Spouses difference?
Tighter finances.
Tighter finances or breastfeeding woes. Okay, I'm getting, okay, so we've got a tie between spouses differences, tighter finances. And this is going to be very useful to us because this is what we will be using. We'll be spending more time, yeah? Okay, I think we can just end poll. Okay, so thank you so much. So let's focus on spouse difference and tighter finances, yeah? Okay, because this is real time, this is created for you. So let's start with our first. I want to focus the first discussion on our identity, because I think that's a huge transition. From a woman, especially a new mom, I'm not saying someone who has the second or the third. As a new mom, I'm always living for me or my spouse. And then there's this new infant, and I am supposed to be responsible for the psychological, physical, spiritual, emotional development of this new infant, of this new being. Okay, so if we were to start with you, VERNESSA, in your opinion, right, what is the single largest transition for new mom's identity?
The shift in focus. You know, suddenly from you and your spouse, and everything now is just to this tiny human being, from the place you're going to eat, from the food you're going to eat, the people you're going to meet, where you're going to go, your weekend activities, is all suddenly just evolve around that little child, right? That sudden shift in focus. So I think sometimes as a new mom, like even for myself, right? In the beginning, it's like, okay, I want to do the very best that I can do, you know. So we go into all this almost self-sacrificing mode. You know, and then after a while, you realize that it's actually quite tiring, you know, because I realized what I tried to do was focus a lot on the child, and then my cup is like slowly depleting, and then I rest for a little bit, you know, top up 20%, and then try to give to the kid, to the spouse, to the friends, to the work, and then deplete again. So in fact, I'm actually always giving from the leftovers. I'm not giving from the best version of myself, because, you know, when things doesn't go as what I expected, I'd be more easily agitated. This is very honest and open, right? Very frustrated, very short fuse, you know. You're like, oh, why don't people get it? Why can't we get it going, you know? And then if you look back, it's like, no, actually, I need to learn to take care of myself first. Because then I realized taking care of myself is part of taking care of my family. That self-care, you know, is also childcare in that sense. So when I started to take more rest, right, I realized there's a big difference. And a way for me to do it is learning to hold boundary, which for me as a people pleaser initially was very hard. People ask me to do this, okay. My child one is okay. Then later you're like, actually I'm very tired already. But you just continue going with it, right? So I think learning to hold the boundary. So even for my daughter, who is only 3 years old now, she knows, even if mommy wake up early, that's her time. I will only go to her at 7 o'clock. So she will play at the living room herself and things like that. So knowing to hold boundary. Oh, if mommy need to have Zoom, that's her time. So I think that helps me to balance a bit. And sometimes people say like, oh, it gets easier when the kid grow older. It doesn't. It doesn't, okay? It's just different set of challenges all the way until they are teenagers. As an educator, I see that transition in families, right? So this balancing act of not just focusing about the child or me, but integrating both. This balancing act is constantly fine-tuning in our whole journey with our children. And mom, this job we can't quit, right? So basically this integration needs to be your entire life, in that sense. Yeah.
I love how you talk about the integration, right? And the transition throughout and how it continues to shift the dynamics between the parent and child. And I think it's not just the mom and the child, but the entire family support system, and it expands, right?
Yes, for sure.
So one child we move to 4 children, Dr. Jade. So what is one lifestyle tip that you can share with new moms in easing the transition?
I think I'm wondering which hat to wear when I talk to you about the transition that new moms need to make. I worked in the pediatric emergency space for a number of years. So I definitely saw a lot of, very parents who were very desperate to have, to be the best of whom they can be for their children whom they perceive to be unwell. In many instances, though, it was more of a lifestyle adjustment that was required. So, for example, they just weren't coping well with the kids crying, even if the kids were actually okay, or not coping well with the change in sleep patterns, even though, no one was physically sick in that sense. But what I saw was that there was some emotional unwellness. And that's the hat that I think I will wear when I answer this question with you, because now that I've started my life coaching practice, I do see a lot of clients who are new moms who are struggling with that change in lifestyle. I think it really helps to acknowledge that things are different. I think the problem does get magnified when we don't want to acknowledge things are different, when we want to feel like we're still the same alpha female from before, we're the same, successful ladies who did well in school, who are on top of our careers, who are always on track for promotion, and all of a sudden with a kid, we're like, I can handle this small human. And then, it turns out we can't, because things are different now, and none of those degrees you had matter, your intelligence quotient doesn't matter. It's really more about just acknowledging now there's a new life in this family. It's going to be a scary experience. We need to have open, honest conversations and acknowledge where we need help, either as moms or as spouses with whomever is supporting us. It could be the spouse or the mother-in-law, and just accept that with some humility, I suppose. I know it's tough because I'm one of those women that I worked in pediatric emergencies. I had a head start with 3 older stepchildren as well. But when I had my firstborn, it was really hard. It was really hard. It was basically like being on call every single night, and everybody just giving you just for this one creature, and everyone giving all sorts of advice, medical advice, traditional advice, different cultures having their own perceptions of how to breastfeed the baby, sleep train the baby, how to conduct yourself. Do you give your whole life up for this baby, or do you hold your own, and what do you do? And so I think just acknowledging that things are very different, that we might have to make some big changes in our lives, at least for the moment, and reach out when we have help. I think it was really hard for me to reach out because I suppose maybe it's a little bit of imposter syndrome was creeping in. It's like, how can you call yourself like a super senior doctor in the pediatric emergency space? And, at that time, almost a budding life coach when you can't even manage your own baby. But it doesn't mean you have to be an expert in everything. You just need to be able to identify when there's a gap in expectations and reality and ask for help. Nobody knew I needed help because I didn't ask for it, because I didn't dare to. So I think that would be the one big change that I would recommend that people make, which is to acknowledge in themselves there is a very big change. The big elephant in the room is a small baby, and ask for help because things are not what they thought it would be.
I love what you share and the humility you share from, because I think reading all the books, knowing things in our head, never prepares us for the emotional experience where suddenly it's screaming at night and suddenly I don't get to sleep. And then everything that I've read, it's now a live-in experience. And I think that completely shifts everything. Yeah, so thank you for sharing. So parents ask for help. Yeah, but even when we ask for help, I just want to ask, remember you were surrounded with well-meaning advice.
Yes.
So sometimes people tell you, out from a good space, oh, you
Yes.
should do this, maybe this is better.
Yes.
And then there's huge support that we then have.
Yes.
How did you cope with that?
I think it's also just asking, setting boundaries and expectations for people, for our support group. Sometimes you don't necessarily need the same kind of help from the same person. So the support that you need from, the support that I needed from my parents, for example, would be really just for them to say, I'm doing okay, and then that they might want to help me take the baby for a couple of hours. But that doesn't mean I'm a complete failure as a mom. It's just that I know that they are around and available, very experienced, and to just go and have a nap. So that help might be different from the help that I require from a friend. Maybe I just want to vent. Maybe I don't actually want any advice. Maybe I just want to tell them how tired I am and how strange it feels to not be working, how strange it feels to not be making deadlines for mega projects. My only deadline right now is like 3-hourly breastfeeding. I just want someone to listen without then telling me, then maybe don't breastfeed so much, maybe you feed formula milk. You know what I mean? Like I don't really need that kind of advice. So I think maybe it's just letting them know as well, like, hey, I'm just gonna say some things to you. I might cry, it might be scary, but it's okay. I don't actually want to hear more information. I just need a listening ear. So sometimes when people speak with me now, for example, I say to them, do you want me to just listen as a friend? And I'll just listen and I won't say anything. Or do you want me to listen as a coach? Because then I will be asking you questions to create awareness about your situation. Or do you just want, advice? Because sometimes some of the junior doctors, my junior staff, they just want advice. So, they want me to tell them, just take a break, without sort of asking them many evocative coaching questions. How does this really make you feel? So I just ask them, what do you want from me? And then hopefully they'll be honest and let me know. So that would be how I'd approach it.
I love the commonality that I hear from Vanessa and yourself. I think there's a very high level of self-awareness to begin, and that boundary is what I hear being repeated, the theme, yeah? So I think that's wonderful, because when we are more anchored on what we know we need, we begin to be less susceptible to living up to others' expectations. We begin to come from a space of being more grounded.
Yeah, so when I I also hold Pregnancy Loss Circle, my support group, right? I actually call this the navigation mechanism. We always talk about coping mechanism, right? But we don't talk about how do we help others to navigate what we want. Yes. So I actually call this the navigation mechanism, exactly how she says. Yeah.
So, and I love it, right? So I tell my husband, no, you just keep quiet. When we go to my in-law's place, you support me on the breastfeeding part, because sometimes we don't talk about it, and then his mother says something, and then he feels caught in between, and then I feel unsupported, and then we go home, and then it's between the two of us, right? And then meanwhile, in the eyes of the mother-in-law, I'm a lousy daughter-in-law, and things like that. So I think to be able to share with the different persons in our inner circle what we need, and as we make a request of them, it's really also to remember that it's on them to decide whether they are going to accede or not, right? Because they can actually say no, much as we don't like. Okay, but so Andrea, so as a psychologist, what are some mindset on how do we get mentally prepared?
I don't know if there's really a way that you can truly be mentally prepared, because the reality will always be different. And I think in this transition, it's not just, suddenly the baby comes and I need to be prepared for when the baby comes, but it's actually the entire pregnancy journey as well. And not just the pregnancy journey, but our histories, whether it was difficult to conceive, whether you had pregnancy loss, whether, you've had your own sort of personal traumas in the past, even in childhood, because all of this affects this transition as well. Because, a lot of times having this new life, it's not just a physical, in the environment that changes, but internally there is that shift also. And through the shift, there's a lot of things that can be evoked, traumas from the past, you know, the way that we were parented, the things that we want to compensate for. And I think, again, you know, in this similar vein, it's having that awareness of what is coming up for us, what is being invoked, what we truly need, you know, on a deeper level as well. Why we might be afraid to ask for help, why we feel like we should have it all together, you know, so all of these things kind of fall into play.
I love what you share,
Yeah.
because the thing that comes to mind is really expectations.
Yes.
And the biggest expectation is is the inner tapes that I have from all my past
Yes.
authorities, right?
Yes.
So I want to ask you, right, Vanessa, moving the topic on to expectations, right? You know, all of us, I assert, have this negative unconscious belief that I'm not good enough. And then it shows up when I'm a mom, because I'm trying the best I can. And then there's this unconscious context, right? That, yeah, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. And then we feel like a failure. Anything you want to speak in about that?
Yeah, I think, you know, like that's a message that society sometimes tell us, you know, don't worry, when you're a mom, you know what to do. You know, we hear that, right? So then it comes in that perception that, oh, I should know what to do. If I don't know what to do, you know, means something is not right, you know, means I need to go and equip myself with more things. But then as you go along, right, I think it's being courageous enough to be vulnerable and ask yourself really hard questions deep down. Like, why do I define myself to the success of my child, to their performance, to their result? You know, if they don't do well, means, oh, I feel like, oh, something not right. I didn't teach them well, you know. And sometimes you also, why is there a need to appear as a successful mom? That I can juggle everything, it's okay, I don't need help. You know, why is there a need? Asking yourself deep down, why is it so hard to ask for help, like what Dr. Jade, you know, just mentioned? Why is there a need to please others people's expectation, to meet their expectation, or the need to be needed? Sometimes as women, you know, we are taught to be more like, you know, pleasing and helpful and kind, right? So we have a tendency to be needed and the tendency to please other people as well. Yeah, so I think asking this question sometime, if I were to take away all the child's achievement and performance and results, how do you define yourself as a mom? Because if you're constantly always seeking external validation to validate who you are, right, you'll never be enough. You'll never be enough. It's a constantly, I can do better, I can do more, I want this, you know, and that negative perception, because you're not filled your cup from inside. So I think that's very important to also understand when someone tells you something, the expectation, right? Is it the expectation from yourself that you need to do this? Is it the expectation from your spouse or your in-laws? Or this sometimes you're actually, nobody had this expectation of me. It's just my own expectation of where I want to go. That's one thing, right? Like you set the boundary so high, but why is there a need to set the benchmark so high in that sense? And also asking yourself, when people tell you something, is this a fact or is this just that person's subjective opinion? Because sometimes when you hear people say, oh yeah, my friend said this is very good and I should do this, or my parent say I should do this, you know, the I should comes out a lot, right? Is this a fact, a science-based or research kind of fact, or is it just someone's subjective opinion or feeling? If it's a subjective opinion, then the next question is, why am I putting so much weight on this person's subjective opinion? Is this person worth me like putting so much weight on their assessment, right? What we always confuse is we take people's subjective opinion and put it as a fact. Like, oh, I should do this, but I didn't do this, so hence I'm not a very good mother. But that's just maybe your parents' perception, but it's not a fact.
And I mean, to add to that, right, even if it worked for that person, so for example, even if it worked for you, it may not work for me. So I remember when I was a new mom, my friends were telling me, hey, so every, 3 hours we must see how much you feed them and things like that. And then they've got this schedule, right?
Yes.
For me, to make sure that your kid, your infant eats enough. And I'm sure it all comes from a good space, but that's just not Junior. So I'm latching 100% of the time. You ask me how much the infant is drinking, I have no idea, because from breast directly into their tummy, there's no measurement. Enough, I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. I don't know whether she's crying because it's not enough, or whether she's cold, or whether, she's reflecting my own fears or my own insecurities. You know, so I think I love what you say. And as you share that, right, I think the purpose today, right, is really for each mom to know that yes, as we take whatever well-meaning intentions people tell us, it's really on us to decide my motherhood journey. And if I make a mistake, let's be good with it, right? Because making mistakes is part of the journey, and that's where we learn. And that's for us to maybe share with someone if the person wants to, or in a similar journey, and maybe not, right? And then I think the entire experience anchors us on being in the present, not expectations of what should, or my past, like what you brought up, how my parents what they used to do to me, and then now I should be doing it onto you. So I think that creates a space for us to make mistakes and enjoy the now. Right? Because even Dr. Jade, with 3 kids, and then yet you would think in your head, I know, right? When the infant comes out, ta-da, surprise! when tire meets the road, right? So as an influencer, I mean, today's digital era is such that the reality is people post nice, pretty pictures. This mom who has it all together, just give birth, but looking so wonderful, so gorgeous, having it all made. How do we not succumb to having those images as the benchmark of where I should be? Any advice on that?
I think it's probably along the same lines as acknowledging what the reality is. So sort of like just acknowledging yourself and saying that, okay, I'm in this new space. It's probably going to be quite scary. I am not an expert in this experience, meaning to say, even if it's your second or third or fourth child, that experience might be different too, because every child is different. And I humbly go into this, and I will trust, in my relationship with this child, that growing that bond between us is going to be enough to take us through. Because sometimes you learn how to manage a child by growing that trust with the child. And yes, it may be a baby, but even so, there's communication. So for example, when the baby is crying, we mentioned earlier, is baby crying because it's hungry, or is it because his diaper is wet, or is it because it just needs to burp, or what's going on? Learning, spending time with that baby and learning about what each cry means, it pays off. So that's communicating, and that requires a lot of trust and understanding that, that it's between you and the baby, really. So that's quite important. In the same vein, understanding that other people have their own stories too. So we tend to put people in certain roles when we look on, say, social media. It really, really does that to us. But that's the job of social media. So, I mean, that's why these companies are doing so well on the stock market. They're doing their job well. Their job is to bombard us with information, super colorful, short attention span, lots of facts, make everybody look like an expert. You make them look wonderful. It's your own magazines, your own little movie reel, That's kind of the job of social media. So as a consumer, we have to learn to draw those boundaries and to acknowledge, okay, this is me, and that's what they are portraying on social media. It doesn't necessarily mean that the person who's the expert in, say, breastfeeding is necessarily the expert in sleep as well. It's necessarily also a wonderful person, is necessarily also having a perfect marriage. That person is saying one thing about whatever it is that they wanted to bring up on their social media feed. And that's it. That's all it is. So I think sometimes if we're a bit more tolerant about everyone else's mistakes, not just our own, and understand we're all just, we've all just got our little part to play in this metaverse, then I think it'll be a lot easier. So therefore, if I don't expect this person who looks so good on social media to look so good all the time, even behind the scenes, just understand this person is, maybe she's running a business, this person is in PR, this person is not trying to put me down, just trying to make herself feel better, and why shouldn't she?
So look at the wider context.
Exactly. So I shouldn't feel put down. I shouldn't feel, is this person doing this to annoy me? I shouldn't feel bitter about it. I should feel good for her. She managed to get up today and put on her lipstick. I've barely brushed my hair. That's actually a fact. Maybe I can. So just take it a different way. Just say, this person managed to look like Vogue perfect just for one breakfast post. Maybe I can just put a little bit of effort too, because other people who are struggling are able to do all of this. Rather than saying, I must be a failure because this person looks perfect and I do not look perfect. I just want to crawl back into bed, wake up, and hopefully I will not wake up looking this way. So just setting that expectation and understanding there's a context to everything, there's a story to everything. It's never just one flat picture on Instagram. It's really just a whole story behind the person who's doing it, and we're all just trying to pull together. You just have to try and trust that. There may be a couple of people who don't have sort of that positive outlook, but that's okay. You know, that's irrelevant to our lives. Make it irrelevant to your life. That was one big thing that I wanted to say because of the point that came up. But I couldn't help but, because I remember what you said about the breastfeeding and how sometimes it's hard to know how much you fed the baby. And I know there are new moms on this forum, so I have to pull out a fact from my pediatric emergency life and jam it right now into this my new role as a life coach. But I just wanted to say, trust that you're feeding the baby. So if you feel like your breast was quite full before you breastfed the baby, and now it's flat, and the baby looks satiated, you have heard the baby drink, glug, glug, glug. You have seen the baby drink a little bit of milk coming down. You can see she's swallowing. You know, now the baby looks quite happy. The baby is well fed. You don't have to question it too much. You don't have to wonder, oh, but it was only 5 minutes today, it was 10 minutes yesterday, or why did he take so long, 20 minutes? It's always gonna be, you know, it's gonna be enough for the baby. As long as you, the mom, have rested well, have slept well, you're feeling happy, the baby is happy, you can trust in that relationship. Sometimes babies take a shorter time to feed, sometimes babies take a longer time to feed. Just like us, sometimes I can eat in 5 minutes, sometimes I want to take 2 hours over my meal. Similarly for the baby. So just trust. You don't have to be too obsessed how many milliliters of milk is actually going down this baby's throat. The baby's happy, she's going to be happy for the next 3 hours, depending on when the growth spurt is for the baby. And if the baby's not, she'll call for milk again. That's kind of what they do. So don't worry too much if you're breastfeeding and not staring at the number of mils coming out of the bottle. It's going to be okay.
And another fun fact, right? When my husband and I went away on a cruise, my infant refused to drink any milk for 2 days. My auntie, who was the caregiver, was so panicky because she's like, I mean, there was a lot of breast milk in the refrigerator, but she refused because she's never tried the nipple. And so she sent my infant to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician said, it's fine. You know, with breast milk, it's okay. And then finally on the third day, on the day that we came back, right, the baby my infant started drinking, and she was like, phew. So I want to affirm what you're saying, right? Often it's our own fears that the kid or the infant is not having enough, or that we are not doing enough for the infant. But actually, they are fine, right? I think the human body is a lot more hardy than we give it credit for.
Yes.
And two things you shared, right? I think it's very true. Number one, what's our inner dialogue? Catching that. Why not celebrate the other mom who's having a good time on social media? And the second thing, it's like our life is an entire reel, right? You probably didn't see like 2 seconds before she's like, stop crying, and then chicken, and then when the chicken comes, everybody's smiling.
Or the team of 20 people waving something.
Yes, and then after that, why were you stepping on my foot? Oh, your body odor. You know, things like that. And we just frame our memories in just that one picture, but to also have empathy for ourselves and for everyone in general, to know that our life is a series of reels. And even if you catch me now with like unbrushed hair or like having milk all over me, that's just one moment to celebrate. Yes. It's really the inner dialogue. It's like, let's celebrate it. I don't need to look. And this is part of me smelling like milk for a period. And if it's something that can be a fond memory for me, and for another mom, if she doesn't like it, then change it, right? And it's really up to the individual to then decide what makes me happy as a mom.
I mean, something that came to mind was really about, and related to the social media thing and this bombardment of information that we have, right? That I think we're so quick to listen to all of this information, or to go and seek that information, but actually we forget to listen to ourselves. And the worst thing is we forget to listen to our child. Which is exactly what you're saying, it is a very individual and personal relationship that you have with your child. But if you're listening to social media, you're listening to, what's on the internet, you're listening to what your friends are saying, what your in-laws are saying, and what everyone is saying, that you don't actually forget, actually my child's also communicating with me, right, from the get-go. And if I don't listen to my child, no matter how much everyone tells me, I can memorize the entire, textbook of parenting, and not that there is one, but even if there was, I'm still not listening to my child, and nothing I do is going to work because I'm not tuned into my child. So it very much is that attunement, listening to yourself, listening to your child, sometimes learning to just shut everything out and go, okay, wait a moment, what is my baby telling me at this moment? I may not know, but I'm going to try. And in trying, that's how I'm going to learn.
I think if I can sum it into one word, it will be listen to our intuition.
Yes.
And our child's intuition in that sense. And I actually like what Dr. Jade mentioned in the beginning. A lot of time the stimulus is neutral. It's our thoughts and our feelings that put, oh, that person, you know, and the story that we create inside
And then our
ourselves, right?
projections.
Correct, and it's our projection, you know, and our expectation. But actually the stimulus is neutral. And I see a lot of parents like, they say, yeah, you see, I post this photo very nice, my kid's doing this art and craft, messy play. I'm telling you, it looks very nice on Instagram. When you try to do it messy play, it's really messy play.
How
It's like,
long you take to clean up, right? Or even to set up.
it doesn't look exactly like the Instagram post, right? But they might also be experiencing the same thing. But everyone kind of just want to show the nice things and the happy things, right? So sometimes when parents come and say this really genuine, authentic things, so at Mindful Space, we also hold Mother Circle. And it's just a safe space for them to really say that, you know what, this is really hard and shit, you know, and not be judged. Sometimes we just need that safe zone. Yeah.
I think that's very, very important. And talking about expectations, I'm going to give you a tough question because I think just now one of our polls that was, you know, sometimes the differences, okay, social media is one, and let's celebrate them, right? I think we can shift our perspective to begin to understand that, you know, people will do what they do, and it doesn't have to be me. I decide me, right? But what if it comes from our spouse? Right? Because I think one of the questions, right? Differences with my spouse. I say this, he says that. So any thoughts on what we can do?
I mean, I think the thing is that remembering that you're not alone as a mom. You know, yes, sometimes there's a lot of unwanted or too much, you know, intrusive, you know, help from other sources. But you know, your spouse is the one other person that's really supposed to be there for you and in it with you. You are a family unit. You're not just mom and the child. And I think very often it's because moms feel so alone in this, you know, oh, it's my body, it's all these changes, you know, I have to do this alone. Then they neglect that dads are actually also a big part of it. And then sometimes when dads come in, it becomes like, oh, it's us versus you know, like, oh, I want to do it this way, I'm trying to listen to myself, and then you're trying to tell me all these things. But this then goes back to the relationship, you know, that moms and dads have, or moms or dads and dads have. And I think it really is about remembering that you are still a team, you know, that both of you still come from the same place, that you want the same thing for your child, and learning to communicate this really, rather than saying it's not a who's right and who's wrong, or that, oh, I must win, or that you must win. It's not about that. But sometimes it can feel like that's the battle, because that's sometimes the battles that moms have within themselves already. And so, you know, it's to welcome that, hey, actually dad can also be a source of support. And even though there is conflict, you know, and the truth is that, you know, in all relationships, you know, all couples, there's about something, I think research tells us that there's like 70%, you know, of unresolved differences in each couple. So that's actually an extremely high amount that I don't think we realize. So that's the amount that we cannot resolve. And it's fine. It doesn't mean that then everybody breaks up, right? No, we still work through a lot of differences. But it's learning to listen to, oh, actually, when you say this, this is what you want for the child. And this is what I want for the child too. So how can we work together to do the best for our child? So it's not just my child or your child, but it's ours.
I love 70% of unresolved differences.
Yes.
It made me reflect on me and my husband immediately. I'm like, no wonder this. And I think just you giving us that statistic created a bucket, right? I mean, a list for me to, okay, this one goes there, this goes there, this goes there, and it's fine. And then it's not as if to leave it there, but how can we then work on it? Instead of, you know, I think thank you for sharing that, because I think the idealism of like a marriage is and they live happily ever after. That's what we read and that's what we expect, or rather I did. And then when got differences or irreconcilable differences or disagreements, I'm like, we are not living happily ever after. And then, you know, that mismatch is what causes that tension to grow even bigger. But just being okay with the relationship, whether it's sibling, whether it's, you know, sibling, parent, child, or in-laws kind of relationship, knowing that, hey, it's okay. And to live with that, to agree to disagree, I think that's a very powerful space that we allow ourselves to have.
If you sit on the conflict, right, then you forget what's at the core of it. That there's a lot of love there, and that everybody wants the best, you know. But if you're stuck on the no, I have to have the final say, or it has to be your way or the highway, then that's where you will sit. You know, you'll never really get to what's the core of it. And then that's what the child will then see, you know, that, oh, you just fight and then there's a lot of noise and then people walk away, but then nothing's resolved and they forget that, oh, there is a lot of love there.
I love, like my analogy would be pick our battles,
Yes,
right? Like when I was a young I didn't know how to pick my battles. It's constantly about the issue, but it's about the relationship. And if it is truly about the relationship, then the item or whatever it is, whether pink shoes or blue shoes, or becomes less important.
Yes.
Whether eat at this time or study at this time, it doesn't become as important anymore because it's the relationship that becomes the priority.
There's conflict, but find the connection.
Connection before, connection.
Connection before correction is
Yeah.
what you want to
Yes,
say.
yes. I was thinking of
I
that.
think sometimes it's also the missing conversation that we don't have with our spouse, right?
Yes.
And you just you should know already, you know, that you should come in again. So there's the expectation that we kind of project towards them as well.
And assumptions.
Yes, and assumptions, right? Like, oh, you know, you know, if you want the best, we should do this, you know, or you should already know why you're not thought about. But it's just a lot of missing conversations that I feel. And I realized this, like, for men, this is based on research, their emotions are mainly anger. They, you know, but anger is actually a secondary emotion. Underlying, maybe there's fear,
Yes.
there's, you know, the hurt, insecurities, right? So we always see them as like, why are you always angry? You know, but actually there are deeper underlying things that whether we have a direct communication. I find sometimes, you know, we tend to be very indirect. Like, Junior is very hot, but I can just say, Junior, can you just switch on the aircon? But instead of being a very direct, right, we give indirect, and then we try to say, hey, I already dropped you hints, you didn't get it, then you get angry, right? But it's not effective. Your indirect communication is...
I so love what you're sharing, right? Because with new moms, right, I always tell them, tell your husband you want them to sweep the floor now. And then never sweep under the carpet. Tell them, lift it up, show them, and get them to do it, and allow them the space to make mistakes. Because I think as women, we are, like what you say, a bit more intuitive, or we read the nuances. So no need to say, I mean, the joke that I have with a lot of my girlfriends is, you know, if relationship is it, I think another woman understands me better than my husband, who seems to be emotionally lacking in capacity or capability to really, truly connect. You know, it's like, I know he loves me, but the depth of the emotional connection seems like that's the maximum that he's giving, and he's doing his best, and I'm like, still not enough. Like, you should understand. But I think when we come from giving, just being very direct, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you wake up at 4 a.m. today to feed the baby?
This is how I want the bottle to be washed.
Yes. And not only that, right? And if they decide to wash themselves their own ways, for us to just let it pass, right? Because they are trying their best, right? I think something that a lot of moms forget is, well, we're trying our best. And I want to bring the next topic, sleep, right? We're trying our best, and then sleep deprived. I remember when my first infant, day and night, I had no idea. I was constantly changing the bed sheet because she was peeing on it, and then day and night, I had no idea, and we had no help, right? So it was me, my husband, and the infant. So let's talk about sleep, because I think sleep is something that really disrupts the entirety of motherhood in the beginning. Yeah. So VERNESSA, if you can share a little about sleep, right?
Yeah.
How do you go about it? Like,
yeah, so I sleep train Awana. There are different school of thoughts of sleep training. But when I started sleep training, I think my intention was very clear, because I know that if we have a sleep pattern habits, right, the body kind of get used to, just like adults, right, you get used to the rhythm of it. So I wanted her to have a sleep routine of how she goes into bed, and a sleep rhythm when she wake up and when she sleep. And the next intention was actually the ability to self-soothe. So if you understand, like adults, right, 90 minutes is our one cycle of sleep. So actually in between the cycle, we actually maybe turn around when we go to light sleep or go to the toilet or wake up a little bit. But sometimes we're not unaware, because we're able to self-soothe ourselves back to the cycle so, you know, just so smoothly. But with young kids, if you realize when they sleep, right, there's a lot of noise, you know, and actually their cycle is only 40 minutes. So, and if you realize that if they are making noise, it's not because they want you to carry and everything, it's just that they're trying to self-soothe themselves. So I wanted her to have the ability to self-soothe. So I didn't give her a pacifier or anything. My third intention was the ability to feeling safe and secure, to reduce separation anxiety in that sense. So with these three intentions, I kind of sleep train her. I know there are different schools. So even people say sleep train, right? There are actually different school of thoughts in sleep train, you know. There is the really, really strict one, which I don't recommend, Gina Ford. The really like, you do this, if not, then you're like a lousy mom, you fail, you da da da. You know, that kind of message to you is like, you either do this or you're not good enough. Or you have the one that is more moderate that says, oh yeah, it's okay if you want to give pacifier, you know, I follow Tizzy Hall, which is an Australian author, because what she teaches is it's okay if your child didn't sleep that nap time. You as a mom need to know how to then adjust. So it teaches you the balancing and adjusting, and then slowly try to adjust it back. So every day is different, you know. That's the expectation. Oh, if my child already sleep at 7, then today should also sleep at 7. But it doesn't work that way. So it's teaching us how to adjust. And then there's also another New Zealand author, which is even more lenient. It's almost close to you know, feed on demand, that kind of thing. Her book is the one Little Village. Yeah, so I kind of use TZ on her, and I actually combine and take what I want. I kind of okay, this works.
So how long did you take to sleep train?
So by the time she's 6 months, about 6 months, she's able to sleep by herself in a room, dark, and by 7 o'clock she will sleep. And then she will sleep
Through the night?
I think only by 10 months old she sleep through the night. Before that, because I'm breastfeeding, so she still kind of wake up. And I'm okay with it. Some moms say, oh yeah, my kids sleep, you know, by 6 months, like, okay, good for you, great. You know, that my kid doesn't mean that she's any lack. Neither am I any lack. So I think what I see in that, it helps me to have a lot of me time. After 7 months, oh, heaven, you know, and my husband and I get to have a communication. So that's why I kind of feel like, okay, sleep is very important. So even until today, sometimes when we have Christmas party or things like that, right, she'll like, Ma, it's already 7:30, I'm tired, I want to sleep. I know she knows her rhythm very well. And if she wakes up, right, she's able to self-soothe to go back in. And her separation anxiety, I would say is very minimal, like, because she's feeling very safe and secure. It's okay if the room is dark and nobody is here with me. You know, I know I'm safe.
So she sleeps in her own room?
She sleeps in her own room.
From when she was an infant?
6 months old.
Okay.
Yeah, which brought me by surprise one day. I saw her coming out in the middle of the night. She just look around, everything. Sometimes she switch on the lights and then switch it off and she go back into sleep. But if I was younger, I would be very afraid of the dark because of the message that has been brought down to me. Oh, dark is scary, there's boogeyman, there's monster. So I realized that sometimes it's the message what we bring down to the kids, you know. And her first day of school, she just walked in and she said bye, no cry, nothing, you know. And then after that, 1 year later, she said, Mama, I want to have full day. So she's the one who requested from me. So yeah, I feel that helps.
I think one of the benefits, right, is training them to have the independence and to be anchored and to expose them to that when they are very, very young. Because research has shown, you know, like what Aristotle said, give me a boy until 7 and I'll show you the man. All the subliminal, unconscious, because the filters are not yet up, right? Everything that our kids absorb, they are literally sponges. The positive, the negative messages that we conscious and unconsciously model or tell them is going to impact the rest of their lives. So yes, I hear that. And Jade, if we were to ask you, because you do have a routine.
Yes, I actually thought that this is quite similar to the conversation we're having just before this, where we were saying it was good to talk to your spouse about what you need and to tell them what you need. Because I think when it comes to big decisions like breastfeeding versus bottle feeding, sleeping, co-sleeping versus sleeping independently, sleep training versus not, as long as you and your husband can agree on it,
Yes.
and hopefully your gynae or one of the doctors that's involved, a pediatrician or gynecologist, that's actually the most important thing, because you do need some support. It is hard. It's not that you can't say sleep train or feed train your baby without help. It's not that, but it's helpful when someone is there to support you, and that somebody theoretically should be the person who's spending a lot of time with you, which hopefully is your spouse. If not, whether it's the confinement nanny or your in-law or, like I said, your doctor, because sometimes there'll be little glitches here and there, and you kind of want to check in with your gynae if this is normal, with your pediatrician if this is normal. It's very hard if that person is not on board with you.
Yes.
It's very hard if you are wondering if your baby is ill and then you call up your doctor and the first thing the doctor says in a judgy voice is, why are you even doing this? So that's when it becomes hard, not impossible, but it's always easier to have a core support group I would highly recommend that it's your spouse. For those of you who have confinement nannies in the space as well, you know, it's good if they if they also are aligned with what you're trying to do, because it's hard when this experienced older woman comes in and you're paying her for her expertise and she's telling you, don't do what you're doing, do that instead. You know, that's very hard. So one of the things that I do as a life coach, actually, when pregnant ladies or people who have just given birth ask me to help them out with the family situation, is exactly this. I encourage them to have conversations with their spouse, with a confinement nanny, or it may be a domestic helper. Some of us don't have confinement nannies, but the domestic worker is definitely involved in the care of the baby. So that person also needs to be on board, and just to encourage conversations and to trust one another. As a coach, it's very goal-based. So what is the point of this? What is your goal? Is it to make sure that your baby is happy and healthy? Is it to make sure that your family, you know, can move through this harmoniously and get through this tough, you know, 3 months, 6 months, year? Teenage years can also be hard. You know, or is it important that you're right? If it's important that you're right and you get the last word in, well, there's certainly a bunch of things you could say. If it's more important that, you know, the baby is happy and healthy and that we have that sort of evoked a wider perspective from everybody, including spouse, doctor, confinement nanny, domestic helper, in-laws. You know, if the goal is the baby's happiness, and sometimes it requires us to eat humble pie. So what is the goal, I think, is probably an important question that we can ask ourselves as we have these conversations, which will definitely involve some conflict. I think it's really interesting that, you know, as a leader in an organization, at work, for example, we actually encourage diversity and inclusion, and we encourage conflict. You know, if you don't have any conflict, it's too homogenous in the boardroom. So we actually encourage conflict because you can get wider perspectives and you can make a group decision on what's best. But at home, sometimes we switch and we don't encourage diverse opinions, and we always want to be right, and we feel like if our husband, even without us telling them what we want, like if he doesn't support us, you know, magically, then it's a fail. It's a giant fail on our marriage, on him, on us. You know, why doesn't he know what I want? Doesn't he love our baby? Of course he does. You know, but we suddenly become different people when we impose that new expectation on ourselves. So actually, it's the same themes that we've been talking about from the beginning, about unrealistic expectations, about how different it is from reality, that gap, what we're going to do with that gap. You know, are we gonna have a conversation about it? Are we gonna be honest about it? Sometimes it might involve us saying that we're wrong about something. But if the goal is the baby, then it really guides a lot of conversations about sleep. So for me, I feel like sleep training is very, very important. I think structure is very, very important, but I myself was unable to do that just because I do shift work. My husband as well, he's entertained a lot. So we couldn't consistently carry that through. So we went the other route. We decided to be more sort of like organic with our kids. There are definitely days where I regret it because I'm like, oh, what do you need a structure, people, structure? It would help so much with other things like homework even, you know, but you know, that's just not the way it went.
And
but we made the best of, thank you. But we made the best of that situation. I actually wrote a book recently called Goodnight Marian that's gonna launch in a couple of weeks. And thank you. And it's precisely about that situation you described, about me trying to put my daughter Marian to bed, but her not wanting to go to bed because she's afraid of the dark. And in that sort of story, we sort of decide to put the different animals in the house to bed together, and we have a little conversation about each one. And there's a mindful theme that comes up about friendship, about appreciation, about hopes and dreams and fears. And you're not meant to have all those conversations in one night. You're supposed to sort of like pick one a week and then discuss it and integrate into your lives. But my point was that for me, how I cherish that space with them within this very difficult time of trying to put them to bed, trying to coerce them, coax them, scold them to go to sleep. I realized that it's much better just to have a conversation with them. You know, why can't they sleep? What are they afraid of? What went wrong that day? What's bothering them? You learn a lot about them. I know for lots of parents, they do all the learning in the daytime, like normal people do. But for me, you know, I talk a lot with them at night before they go to bed. So that's my opportunity to, you know, to have our routine, you know, a sort of a strange organic routine where we have conversations at night. We're all clad in pajamas, you know, we're reading books, we're finding about each other's day, they, they also ask
That's a
about me.
connection.
There's a
Yes.
connection, yeah.
And I
It's
think what's
funny.
important, right, is it doesn't matter which time of the day
Yeah.
or how often or, but it's really that there is that set time for
Yes.
each of the child.
Yes.
So they know they're important, right?
Yes.
Instead of just having group activities.
Yes.
So for me with 5, right, I do have that one-on-one time.
Yes.
I don't have it every day, to be
Yes.
very frank. With
Yeah.
putting the summit together, they know, right? But I think enough for them to know I am special enough
Yes.
to, and I do not have to vie for mom or dad's attention.
Mom is
because,
busy, but then she will always make time for me.
yes,
Yes.
because there's that one-on-one connection that is, that direct line
Yes.
that I don't have to go via someone. I don't have to act up. I don't have to throw a tantrum to get her attention.
Yeah.
She is available,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I matter enough for her to set aside the undivided time.
Yes, exactly. So that's our kind of routine. So I think, like I said, I feel structure is important. That is true. It helps them to have that security. It helps them to have the confidence. But structure isn't necessarily within that arbitrary 24-hour time frame. So like Junior, for example, you were saying that it's not every day that you can do it. You try to, but it just doesn't happen all the time. But so your structure is maybe in a 48-hour cycle or in a weekly cycle. That doesn't matter, but there's some kind of a structure. So, within that, we try and build smaller things. So for example, for us, bedtime prayers are important, so that's that's the daily thing that may not involve me, because I try and get them to just have that direct conversation, with God and the universe that doesn't involve me. But, that structure can include organic activities, can involve a little bit of, sort of disorganization in a sense, So everyone's got a different kind of structure. And I think it's just important that you learn which one works for you. Because if you are quite disciplined and if you're able to do it and if your child is able to respond to do, daily sleep training, that's fantastic. That's part of routine. That's like learning to brush your teeth, like for grown-up ladies, it's like a skincare routine, It's important, not just about the product. It's just to have that routine, to remember it's the day is over. We're now lifting off our stress and we're getting ready to go into nighttime. It's just that concept. So I guess everyone does it a little bit differently. And for children, I guess sleep is always a big topic because sleep is important.
If I can just add on, I have people who come to me, Vern, you did very well sleep training your daughter. They're so amazed, right? Can you teach us and everything? So I always ask them the first question, is your husband on board with you on this?
Yes.
If he's not, don't do it, because you end up fighting and there's more stress on you and you cannot sleep, the baby cannot sleep, it's worse.
And then end up resenting VERNESSA maybe.
Yes. So I
Right?
say,
Yeah.
first thing, your husband need to be on board with you. If not, it's very hard. Like you say, that consistency, that congruence, as a family unit, is very, very important. I was lucky enough. My husband was just like, okay, we will. But I know it was very hard for him because I was teaching him how to listen to the cues of her cry. Is it because she's hungry, her diaper, or is it a protest cry? That kind of thing. And sometimes he'll be like, okay, so can I go hug her? Can I go see her? So he is feeling very uncertain. And I'm just glad that he's able to give me that space and trust in me.
Experiment.
Yes, to explore and experiment. There are some days he'll be like, oh, are we a little bit too harsh today? Then I'm like, okay, let me think.
I also don't know.
Yeah, so literally a bit back and forth, it's an
Yes.
experiment. We are both first-time parents, right? But being
Figure it out
building
together.
and figure it out together, right? Instead of just fighting or like. So some of my friends after a while they're like, I think this is too tough. I say, if you and your husband feel like it's too tough and you don't want, then by all means, it's not like by hook by crook you need to get this done. Everyone has different ways, and just because you don't follow a certain way doesn't mean you're not good enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And I want to swing the conversation over. So from someone who's sleep trained all the way to someone who's who's open about co-sleeping.
Yes.
I think the purpose of this panel session is really to tell parents, mums specifically out there, that you've heard a diversity of views, and it's intentional so that you begin to pick what works for you. Yeah. So Andrea, if you can share.
So
about
I
your
co-slept with both of my kids. So we would put we had two, I think, queen mattresses on the floor together, and then we just all slept there. So even for my firstborn, of course, I think we had larger space at the time, and we slept with her. Even when we moved, we continued to sleep with her, through different homes. And the thing is that co-sleeping is not easy, because it means there's a little bit of anxiety. So, and we didn't do it from newborn, of course. She slept in a cot, which was just sidecar next to our bed. initially because I was worried that we might squash her or anything, and newborns are just too fragile. But she was right next to me. So whenever, I heard her, I woke up and I checked whether she's breathing. I could still do that. So, I mean, maybe part of that was also my own anxiety, just needing to have her near me so that if anything, but it's also partly laziness. Like I can't have her in another room because I can't fathom trying to wake up in the middle of the night, walking to the other room and attending to her. So it was just in part laziness and in part anxiety having her next to us. And this just continued until she was 4.5. So we slept with her until 4.5, and this means going to bed together with her. And convenient for me because she goes to bed at 8, 9 o'clock. So do I. So I also fall asleep. So I get all the sleep that I need. So I think the thing is that different moms need different amounts of self-care and me time. Some moms need more, some moms need less. For me, it's about sleep. So if I can sleep, I'm happy, So if I can go to bed with her at 8:30 and fall asleep, that's fine. So we don't really have, at 3 o'clock we must have afternoon nap. At 10 a.m. we must have morning nap. No, we really didn't do that. We're just like, okay, Aga, she looks tired. She needs to take a nap. Okay, we'll let her nap. So we just listen to her cues. And of course, sometimes you're like, I think she really needs to nap, but maybe she's a bit overtired and it's hard to nap already. But then we just go with it anyway, then soothe and all of that. And in the middle of the night, she wakes up, then I wake up too. And that can mean waking up 5-6 times a night. So do I really get sleep? No, because I follow her schedule. But then I think in that way, she always knows that we are next to her, that we're always attuned. And by about 4.5, she, because we moved again, and then we sort of set up her own room, made it really nice, got her to choose her own bed sheets, just gave her ownership of that. And I was stunned because the first night she just slept, went to bed, said good night, she fell asleep, and my husband and I stood outside the door and were like,
She's not coming out to ask for us.
And then I felt like sad. It's like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. I can't believe it. There was like no fuss. And of course, the first few nights I still had the baby monitor on at 4.5, thinking, what if she falls off the bed? I couldn't sleep because I was like, oh no, she wakes up in the middle of the night. And there was just no fuss, nothing. So my son at 4, we still co-sleeping. So she sleeps in her room now, and my younger son, he still sleeps with us. And I recently asked him, are you ready? And he's like, no. So okay, fine, it's up to you. So they actually still woke up. I think it was maybe until about 2.5 before they slept through the night. So I don't know. I think every child has their own temperament. Every child has their own kind of thing. I breastfed him a lot, so I think we had to wean him before he could finally kind of sleep through the night, because I think because of night feeds. So night feeds does interrupt a little bit. But then if he's not ready, we'll just wait for him to be ready.
I so love that, because I think at the end of it, in our motherhood journey, it's really, this is just one.
Yeah.
Then we have toilet training, and then we have going to school.
Yes.
Each child is so different, and when they are ready, instead of us forcing them, then I think it becomes so effortless.
I was going to say, it's the same. Toilet training, we never toilet trained, actually. I just waited till my daughter said, I don't want to wear night diapers anymore. Okay, fine, great. I'm happy. Why? Because I'm also a bit of a lazy parent. I too much scheduling, too much structure. We always have our routines, and that's important. But because the routines help us to connect. And I think don't have a structure for the sake of having a structure. Have it because it works for you, and have it because it's what is safe for you, and it offers that reliability. They know what to expect, and that predictability. If you're not one for very strict structures and routines, then don't. If you don't do it for yourself, don't do it for your child. It has to be authentic.
Wonderful. And with that, I think structures are a means to an end. It is not, if I don't have it, I'm necessarily bad or less than. It's just what works, right? And the end is really always about connecting, not just husband and wife, but also especially with each of our children. So with that, I trust that you had a very insightful session. Thank you for spending time with us. And now I hand you over to Charlene for the prize presentation. Thank you, and stay tuned for our next panel session, which is Decoding the Science of Women's Health. Bye.
Bye.